Welcome to Theology Thursday, an ecumenical space for students to discuss matters of faith and theology.
I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
I am your co-host, Ryan Mock.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
Well, last week we did an episode. Johnny wasn't here, and the episode was better off for it.
That is correct.
We missed you, Johnny.
Actually, Johnny, we have you here today because you're fired.
Yeah,
I know.
No, genuinely, I would have loved to have heard whatever mamby-pamby nonsense you had to offer to the conversation. It would have been really valuable.
Oh, well,
for entertainment
thank you.
purposes. We talked about worship.
Okay.
Worship music specifically. What's the
Yeah.
purpose of music in our corporate gatherings?
Johnny doesn't believe in that, though.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, you guys don't exist. It's a simulation.
Actually, we are figments of your imagination, Johnny.
Plot twist. But we did the episode, and in the beginning we boasted about how this is our first episode in the studio. Unfortunately, we didn't get any video. So
That is very sad.
those watching on YouTube just saw the Theology Thursday logo and heard Ryan being like, "Isn't this great? This is our studio."
Look at this.
Wait, hold on. Oh, so then we
What
could
studio?
we could get a fresh start. Isn't this great? This is our studio.
So here we are, and it's you know what, I think it's better this way because now our first time in the new studio, Johnny is with us.
Oh.
But doesn't this, I told Ryan last week, there's something kind of energizing about hitting the record button and being in this space. It just feels more official in a way, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the fact that everything's already set up when we come in and we just go.
Yeah.
Just get up and go.
And we're fully aware of the fact that this is not like where it needs to be. You'll get to see it progress over time. We got a lot of different plans and ideas, but this is a great start. It's a great start. And we appreciate it. And I want to say that this start is possible. Some of the equipment that I've been able to get to make this possible is because of your support on Patreon. So I want to thank you for that. And if you're interested, you can get t-shirts, merch, all this stuff, plus the after show, the monthly reading hour podcast where we talk about books we've been reading. There's all sorts of exclusive content on Patreon, starting as low as $3 a month to support us. So those are some things to consider.
Hey, you all, if you're not a Patreon supporter, you all missed a really awesome after show last week.
Y'all missed a really awesome after show last week. We talked about the Chris Tomlin theory. We have some theories about Chris Tomlin.
Yes.
And then this week, okay, because we're about to get into our subpoints, and there was two big topics this week that would have made great subpoints, and I had to choose between the two. I'm saving one of them for the after show. So again, Patreon, that starts as even $3 a month. Tier 1 gets the after show, and on the after show today, you will be able to see our trailer reaction to God's Not Dead, We the People trailer. Okay? So I don't even talk about that anymore. It's out there. They're making God's Not Dead 4.
Continuing the greatest saga in movie history.
We the People. The title says a lot about where they're going with this. So
I'm a little scared.
We'll do that on the after show, but you have to give us your money first. So here's the subpoint that we are going to talk about. Okay, this is really exciting. Have you gents ever heard of a man named Ken Ham?
Who is that, Connor?
We've talked about him a couple times before on the show, but Ken Ham was a high school science teacher. He doesn't have any more than a bachelor's degree, but he decided that he wanted to be the father of creationism and Christian apologetics. So he created a ministry called Answers in Genesis. They developed a bunch of curriculum, a bunch of books, basically giving scientific evidence, answers in Genesis. A lot of it is defending.
They made up a bunch of
stuff in
answers that aren't in Genesis.
Okay. So
You could tell we might have a little problem with Answers in Genesis.
And there's a couple things that Ken Ham is well known for. One of them is the debate between him and Bill Nye, which was just pitiful. Every 5 seconds, his answer was, Mr. Nye, there's a book. It's called the Bible. And it's like, that's not what we're here for. We know that you read the Bible and that you believe it's true. Like, defend your case. And he couldn't. It was really pitiful. But all that being said, he has something in Kentucky called the Ark Encounter. Okay, so And there's also the Creation Museum. In fact, the Creation Museum was there first, and that walks you through and defends all of these, young Earth creationist views. And there's a petting zoo and a restaurant, so it's kind of cute.
Nice. Do they have llamas there?
Probably.
Nice.
We should go sometime.
I honestly, it's probably kind of cool. Like I know my wife's been, and I'm sure, because this is the part that I'm sure is very impressive. I have no doubt. They've done a scale replica of Noah's Ark. So it's 3 stories. It's huge. You go through, and there's all these different attractions within it. And honestly, I'm sure it's probably well done. I mean, they bring in a lot of revenue. They have a lot of people that come and visit from out of state. It's a big attraction there in Kentucky. So they announced recently that they're going to be expanding, and now he's calling it a theme park. He's just fully embraced that. Before it was like a museum educational experience. Now he's just like, no, it's a theme park.
Is it Hamland?
Hamland.
That would be awesome. It's just like a spiral ham with his beard on it. All right. So they're adding a couple things to them. They're adding a carousel.
Nice.
Which, of course, like probably 2x2, the different animals.
Yeah.
That'd be cute. Yeah. They're doing a scale model of what Jerusalem may have looked like during Jesus' time. And I love speculation, so it sounds great.
Wow.
Like miniatures, right?
Well, yeah, and you can make a pretty good educated guess.
We have enough. So I honestly, that's probably I'm sure they'll do a great job with that. That's all well and good. Here's the part I'm concerned about. Now Ryan's already heard about this. Johnny, do you know where I'm going with this? Have you heard? Oh, okay.
I have no clue about any of this.
I can't wait to see your reaction, because when I saw this, I honestly thought it was a Babylon Bee article. I thought it was a joke, and turns out it is 100% true, really happening. Ken Ham has decided to rebuild the Tower of Babel, which, if you're familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel, probably isn't the best idea. Why, based on the story that this is inspired by, Johnny, would this not be a excellent idea to rebuild the Tower of Babel?
So basically, the essence of the story of the Tower of Babel is that, when in the garden we were seated near God, and heaven and earth were met together, and then God said, "You blew it, and I'll make a way for you." He made the messianic promise in the garden. Basically, he's like, "I'll make a way for you," and then a bunch of guys got together and they said, "We don't need God to make a way for us. We'll get back up there ourselves." And they started to define good and evil for themselves in that moment. And so they built this tower to ascend back to God, so that heaven and earth could meet again. They thought they could do it themselves, and God was like, "Yo, I told you I was going to save you. You don't have to do this." And he scattered us. And
then they started speaking different languages.
Right, exactly.
So what if Ken Ham starts building it, and all of a sudden he starts speaking like Russian
language.
Or something, or Portuguese?
I was kind of shocked to see this. I was like, wait a minute. Like, what? Because they are trying to build, as best as they know, something that would match what they were trying to build.
Believe it or not, I'm not totally like off kilter about this. I don't think it's necessary, but I would say like the intention of building this replica of the Tower of Babel is obviously not the same as the intention of the original people building it.
It still seems a little distasteful.
Yeah, I mean,
if they were making, what I don't understand is why not the same way they're doing with Jerusalem? Why not make a miniature model? Why not it is
weird
to educate about the Tower of Babel instead
of
actually rebuilding it?
Look at our scale model of one of the biggest affronts to God in the Old Testament.
Right. I mean,
take an elevator to the top and get a picture.
Imagine if you went and for decoration throughout the park, as you're headed to the cafeteria, there were Asherah poles. And
that is true, yeah.
Other Buddhist gods. It's not...
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Look, there's a high place.
Right.
Let's go get our picture.
You get the Molech pit you could throw your kids in when you're trying to get rid of them.
You're right.
It's a little weird, okay?
Right, you're right.
That's just my point. It's a little weird. And
it would be similar to that, yeah, because this is a thing of evil, right? not that you literally throw your kids in it, but even if it was like a roped off area and there's a bunch of people, and there's like a fire, and like, this is what it would have been like to be thrown into the fires. I'm like,
pickup time is at 3 p.m.
Here's the thing. You talked about, his intentions in building this, and he spoke about his intentions in building this. So I'd like to share some of his intentions. One of the things that he mentioned, first and foremost, most importantly, is that their attraction, 80% of the people who come to their attraction come from outside of the state, and they're bringing lots of dollars for local business in Kentucky, so people should support them.
Ken Ham is single-handedly saving Kentucky's economy.
So
it's needed. It's needed, though.
He went from a business standpoint of, I'm going to make lots of money, and I'm going to make you lots of money.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, though,
and
I would say.
You know what?
It's a good sell.
It makes me want to go build a Tower of Babel, because there's money in it. No, I mean, it's just, so, you're hearing that, and you're like, okay, good job, Ken Ham. But here's his other intention in doing this that he shared, and this is splendid. I love this. He has stated that he believes that this attraction will help to solve the problem of racism.
But
Ken Ham single-handedly destroys racism.
Yeah, so Answers in Genesis has a lot of material on about how there really aren't different races. There's just one human race.
Right.
And the things that make our skin color and hair color are just slight, differences in DNA. But at the end of the day, race is a social construct. We're all human beings.
By the way, that's what CRT teaches as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we're in agreement.
Yeah. No, I actually, the videos that they've done on this, I've actually used before. That's probably I'm not going to say only, but probably the only material from Answers in Genesis that I actually appreciate.
But the problem is when you try to use that to erase any sort of cultural differences,
right?
And
which I don't necessarily know
class
that they
differences.
Do. It might be, sort of.
I know. I'm just saying,
because actually, he's saying the point of this attraction is to kind of talk about like genetics and cultures, and basically show the origin of different cultures and ethnicities throughout the attraction. So as you're walking through, it's kind of like, well, these are the different cultures and language groups that probably sprung up from this event, and this is where it led, and kind of walk you through history to today to kind of say, yeah, I mean, this is why we have all these different cultures, but, we're all human beings. We're all friends. So basically, Ken Ham is going to single-handedly destroy racism by building the Tower of Babel.
Well, that's good. I'm glad somebody's stepping up to take care of that nasty thing.
The Tower of Babel, and it's very interesting because in that moment, it was a practical thing that God did to divide them and to keep them from, continuing in their spiral of pride. But it didn't take him long to begin redeeming it, through the Abrahamic promise and all that kind of stuff. And now it's like fully a redeemed aspect of our world is the fact that we are all different and have different cultures. And
it's something that, is indicated in Scripture will be maintained in eternity,
Right.
So cultural differences are to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And certainly acknowledged, not ignored. So yes, I agree. If using this message to the end of colorblindness is the goal, that doesn't solve anything.
Could be problematic.
But if it is to celebrate multiculturalism, then that's a message I can get behind. Not necessarily sure about the method of getting that message across. Don't know that we need a scale in a Tower of Babel. It's fine. Have fun, Ken Ham. There's also been some controversy in the past about him using tax dollars and state funds to build the Ark in the first place. Some people weren't happy about that. But you know what? God bless him. We are going to talk about God's Not Dead, We the People on the after show. A lot of exciting things this week. Towers of Babels and God's Not Dead's.
All the evangelical cringe.
Just wonderful. So today's question comes from a listener named Kim, and this question is no, Ken. Yeah, Ken Ham.
Ken Ham asked this question.
No. So this question, and I'll preface it for you because there's a lot. I'm trying to like shorten it so we can answer it. But what does it look like for Christians to stand by their convictions in a society that really emphasizes and values tolerance? Okay, so what does it look like for Christians to stand by their convictions, a society that emphasizes and values tolerance? And a few examples were given of scenarios where there is no room for tolerance. And these weren't moral scenarios or Christian scenarios. These were just, kind of examples to show that, say, a surgeon would not tolerate unsanitary practices in his operating room. A judge would not tolerate false testimony in his courtroom. Like, there's certain scenarios where you cannot tolerate certain things. So for us as Christians, operating in the culture and society, where do we draw the line? That's kind of the question, the discussion that has been brought forward today.
Yeah. Well, this question has been asked before, not on the podcast, but like as a philosophical question, there is a paradox in tolerance because having a society of tolerance requires you have to have at least a little bit of intolerance for like those very things. A surgeon will intolerate malpractice or whatnot, and there are a gazillion examples you could come up with. But a society that values tolerance has to accept a little bit of intolerance, and in order to develop tolerance in society, you would have to be intolerant towards those who are intolerant. So there's kind of a paradox there, right?
Yeah. That was the first thing I was going to say.
Right, whether you're a Christian or not,
whether you're a Christian or not, you have to confront that idea. Is if you are tolerant, you still have to draw a line.
I reject the premise that our society values tolerance completely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think that nobody really does. But
so. Can you flesh that out more for us?
Yeah. So, for example, right. So we have this debate kind of raging between, LGBTQ plus people and people who hold the traditional sexual ethic, and the flag of the LGBTQ plus community is one of tolerance, right? But by and large, on a majority level, however, I've seen individual cases where people do agree to disagree. But by and large, if you say, you know what, I have a traditional sexual ethic, you hate gay people, you're damaging them, you're responsible for their suicide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you've just thrown tolerance out the window, because if I'm going to tolerate like your belief in the sense that I'm not here to hate you or cast you aside or anything like that, why wouldn't you tolerate my faith, which has a different ethic than yours? Does that make sense? And so you see this all over society. Everywhere where there's tolerance, it's just like you're saying. Everywhere there's a level of intolerance that, to me, it looks like it outweighs the tolerance. It's always in favor of whatever view you hold, unless, and this is what I think sets Christianity apart, is like what I'm saying, where like I can have a different view, I have a different ethic than you, say an LGBTQ person, but I still want you in my church. I still want to have dinner with you. I still respect you as the family unit that you say that you are. Even if I disagree with that family unit, I still respect, like, say, their parents or whatever. I'm going to respect their relationship to their child, and et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't mean that my views have changed. It doesn't mean that I don't see that as sin. It just means that I care for them as people. And I think that I don't know if you can call that tolerance, as much as it is just Christ-like love.
Right. So
because Jesus sat down with sinners, and he didn't mean he endorsed their lifestyle, right? It just meant that he cared for them. And I think by and large, even secular society doesn't really allow for that, because they got to make their point. They got to fight for trans lives. They got to fight for LGBTQ.
And by and large, I think a lot of American evangelicalism doesn't leave room for that either, because we got to defend,
And I think that's sin nature.
Whatever.
That's why I reject the premise that, because I think sin nature is just like, I'm gonna fight for myself, and I'm gonna fight for my tribe.
So as Christians, we should be the most tolerant.
In a way,
Yeah.
right? So, like, if you look at Jesus as an example, he says, not one iota of the law and the prophets is going to disappear, right? So he defends moral standards in a sense. But then he's still sitting down with prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners, right? And so do you call that tolerance, or do you call it, again, Christian love? I think it's Christian love.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I don't think many people would consider that tolerance.
Right, no, because Jesus is not saying, I accept this. He's not saying what you're doing is right, but who you are is what I want. I want to redeem you, basically. And so I think, but yeah, I mean, maybe there's comparisons to what, like, the ideal of tolerance in society.
Right. Well,
but I think it's a completely different animal.
I think all of this discussion kind of points to the fact, well, what is our definition of tolerance?
Right.
Because you can say, oh yeah, society really emphasizes tolerance, but as you were saying, for society to really, put their foot down on certain issues and expect you to fall in line isn't really tolerance at all. Right. And for Christians to love while being able to disagree, that's not necessarily tolerance either.
There's not tolerance that you're not accepting that premise.
So what is tolerance then?
You guys looking at me? I think
Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Tolerance is accepting. Well, I think that tolerance. This is probably a very elementary school definition, but tolerance is accepting people despite what they believe or what they speak, and that could be defined more, I think, and I think there could be nuance expressed in that definition.
Probably
because, again, like I said, I have to go back to we have to express at least a little bit of intolerance in this, because right. I want to tolerate everybody I want to accept everybody for their beliefs and their behaviors and whatnot, but if somebody tries to hurt my friend, I am going to then intolerate that person by defending my friend and defending my friend. So there's a certain level of intolerance there where I don't accept you, but that's only in the case that person is harming.
The dictionary definition is the ability or willingness to tolerate something, in particular the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with.
Yeah, that's a good definition.
So I think too we have to think about, and I can't put words in their mouth, is how our listener defines tolerance in this situation. I would imagine, looking at kind of the scope of history and the way that we've kind of combated as evangelical, as a Protestant culture, the idea of tolerance. Perhaps maybe they're thinking of I know there's a big trend, and it still happens today, but big trend in the humanities to say, well, all truth is, your truth is your truth, and your truth is your truth, and everybody can have their own truth. And it's never ever worked, right? It's all been theoretical, everybody has their thing that they have to defend, and that's why I don't think, you can really be a tolerant person. So,
right, and I think, to me, the way the question was worded sort of indicates that. I mean, tolerance, I would call it hypertolerance, is
right.
As moral relativism,
right.
is often what Christians face,
right.
in certain situations, and there does come a point where we believe in absolute truth,
Yeah, and everybody does. I mean, moral relativism doesn't work functionally.
Right. Yeah. So we deny moral relativism. So we say that there is absolute truth. But we also say, even though you disagree with us or you claim you have your own truth, we still love you anyways.
Yeah. And that's Christian, because here's the thing. We need the same grace every day that person has not yet accepted, if that makes sense. So we've been rescued by the Lord through Christ and through his resurrection. And so it would be wrong of us to automatically just discard somebody as long as their heart is beating, they have a chance to repent and have new life and follow the way of the kingdom. So it's totally congruent with the way of Jesus to say, no, I'm not compromising It's not that I don't believe these things about the Bible or about morality, but I still want to keep that person in proximity of Christ, and Christ is in me. So why wouldn't I accept them in a way, in a sense, right?
Right.
So I think that like tolerance is defined like by the dictionary, and still having like firm beliefs. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
Right.
It's the idea that because we believe in the Imago Dei, that everyone is made in the image of God, we accept everyone, and that is, I mean, earlier you said, so in a sense are Christians to be the most tolerant, and I think in this sense we are. We can honestly say that we accept everyone simply based on the premise that they are made in the image of God, and because of that they have value.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we have to agree with everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we don't. We can't.
Yeah.
We don't have to absorb the worldview of everybody that we love.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really freeing thing to say, that you ought to know the truth. You ought to be studying the scriptures and inviting the Holy Spirit into that process to reveal God's truth to you, and you ought to live by those truths. But that doesn't make everyone who doesn't see or agree with those things your enemy.
Right.
We are called to love and befriend these people in the same way that, as you said, I think is a great example, that Jesus is the greatest example of that.
Yeah.
I love all that. I agree with all of that. I also want to provide a sociological argument for the idea of tolerance from a Christian perspective. The Christianity Today published this article in May. My grandfather sent it to me. It outlines a study published in the journal of the journal Sociology of Religion, and the study was trying to figure out why Christianity is declining in certain countries and growing in other countries. And most people, a lot of scholars would say Christianity declines because of secularization or because of prosperity in that country. But the study actually found differently. This study found that there were three things that contributed to growth in a country. The first one is persecution. This is something that we understand, like the church grows in persecution. But the other two are related to this idea of tolerance. Number one is that the church grows in a country when that country is characterized by pluralism. So the more pluralistic a country is, the more likely Christianity is going to grow in that country. That's that may be counterintuitive to some people, the idea that there's more religions in a country and so therefore Christianity is going to grow. But it actually makes sense if you think about it in the way of like iron sharpens iron, and if you think about a free market, right? What is good for the free market is more competition, and so you could kind of look at Christianity that way. It's competing against other religions. That's actually good for Christianity. And then the second thing that contributes to Christian growth in a country is its level of governmental privilege. So the more governmental privilege that Christianity has in a particular country, the more likely it is actually going to decline. So in countries where you've seen historically Christianity receive privilege from the government, we see today that those countries are overwhelmingly declining in its Christianity.
Oh, Ryan.
But in the countries where Christianity receives no privilege, that's where we see Christianity growing exponentially. Mm. So tolerance and the idea of we want to, first off, we want a pluralistic society because that's good for us. It makes us actually have to try as Christians. And then second off, we want equality among all religions represented in a country. We don't want our religion to be to receive privilege over other religions. So in that sense, we also want tolerance. That's good for our religion. So
Right. Should Christianity not be growing because of authentic relationships?
Yeah.
Rather than because the government or the public school system is backing you up? And I think out of a fear of this push for tolerance, there has been a lot of evangelicalism that has fought back and said, no, we need to bring God back to the schools. We need to do this. We need to do that. And it's like, I work in public schools every day. The kids are having Bible study. It's not like they're not allowed to do that.
The silliest thing I hear all the time is this country really went downhill when they took prayer out of public schools. I don't know what they're talking about. I was always able to pray in public school. I don't know.
There's a middle school that I'm allowed to go into every week and pray over all the lockers before we start. This is a public middle school.
You guys are poking a bear.
Look, I'm just saying that a lot of these fears, and we'll get into that even more with the God's Not Dead trailer. Oh my goodness. They're not a reality. They're not something that we're facing. Yeah, I mean, so anyway, I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to be fighting for a push for the government or the public school system or any of these entities to be helping or favoring us. It's about our relationship with God and with other people. And that might sound overly simplistic, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any other thoughts?
No, I just think that we need to take a second look at the way that we care and love other people. I love what Preston's, and this is like one of the more hot button issues, which is why I go back to it. It's the easiest example. But Preston Sprinkle of the Center for Faith and Sexuality, he's got like a 20 lesson course on like how does a church approach this issue. And you may say, well, that's too much. And he holds a traditional sexual ethic. And like, isn't it simple? Like just, like no gay, like that's the Christian view.
Gay.
And what Jesus showed, like his contemporaries, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, is like, you guys are like looking at this from the completely wrong angle. They kind of just read the law and they're like, we're going to take it literally and we're going to do it this way. And Jesus said, no, there's actually a heart behind these truths. There's a soul to these truths, and he gave life to those words and embodied those words. And so I think that means that we need to allow for nuance, that we it's not always just 1, 2, 3 ABC. It doesn't mean that absolute truth doesn't exist, but how we love people and hold the absolute truth matters, because if you do it the wrong way, you're gonna be like Caiaphas or
and
instead of
some people
Nicodemus.
at first glance may say what you're saying, that's a little wishy-washy, but actually this requires you to know and understand and be committed to absolute truth even more.
Yeah, but it also
to make sure that you're practicing your faith correctly, in scenarios. So,
but it also requires that you be committed to the Holy Spirit, right at the same time. And I think that may be something that we've lost as people. They've got pretty good theology, they've got good morals, but they love that more than maybe they love the way of Jesus, and I just saying. And so we actually have to marry those two things and allow the Holy Spirit to give us discernment. And that's why Paul says that knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. It's not that we don't know things or we don't believe things are true, but people are more important. So we got to love our neighbor.
Nice.
That's right. Yep. Nice.
Well, I think this actually ties in pretty nicely to what we're going to be talking about in the after show. So if you want to continue the conversation there, you can go to our Patreon. It's Tier 1 at $3 a month. That's just the after show. Tier 2 at $6 a month, which is the after show and the monthly Reading Hour podcast. And then Tier 3, which is $12 a month, which is both of those and unlimited merch. We will be sending T-shirts pretty soon. We will be sending out mugs. Lots of fun stuff coming.
Do I get a mug?
You are going to get a mug. Yes. So you can get a mug too, and watch us discuss the truth about Chris Tomlin and God's Not Dead 4. So, without further ado, I think in summary, we stand for God's truth in any and all scenarios, but we do so in unconditional love.
Yeah.
I'm down for that.
Cool.
That sounds great.
All right, Ryan, give it to us.
Yeah, yeet.